Hi, it's Brendon, the Technology Concierge, and today I'm joined by Daryl Brett. How are you, Daryl?
I'm good, and thank you very much for having me back.
No, it's great. Daryl and I spoke about minibars a couple of weeks ago. It was a great session. So if you haven't watched it, I'd encourage you to do that. I learned a lot, including what the difference between a fridge and a minibar is. So all these years I've been completely uneducated, and now I know. When we were talking off camera, just after that, the whole area of mobile key came up and BLE and NFC and where we currently stand. And I said to Daryl, it would be great if we could do another session. So here we are today. So Daryl, probably a good starting point. Maybe if you could give us a little bit of history on, electronic door locks.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Again, not wanting to go too far back into the history and where they all started and which hotel, etc. But the principles of how do you get through a door. Now, you've got to start off really with a key. That's where this whole story started. Now, how does a key work? So a key is a certain shape, and in the door is the receiving shape, so the male and the female part. So you get given a key that matches your door. You turn it, you open the handle, you go in. All right, so literally the key is just a carrier of information, a carrier that's unique to that door.
Yep.
Okay, so effectively when you move over to the world of hotel locks and where we went from metal keys to cards, bits of plastic, the principle remains the same. You get given something at reception that matches your specific door. Okay, so it has data. Now, there's a lot of history about what data is on the card, and I can remember many years ago, 20 years ago, when we were selling magstripe card technology, there was this huge concern that when you were handed over your magstripe card, it had your name, your credit card, your birth date, everything about your personal history on there. But the fact of the matter is, it had very small packet of data. Now, what information went onto that card? Well, the card needs to know which building it's in. So the Ritz-Carlton, for example, it needs to know which room it's allowed into, so bedroom 101 of the Ritz-Carlton, and it needs to know the date and the time of when it's allowed to work. So 10 o'clock on Friday when you check in, and 4 o'clock on Sunday when you check out. So effectively, that's the key. So where it is, who it is, and the date and the time. Now, the lock itself is a battery-operated lock. It doesn't communicate to anything else, so it has to be programmed for effectively the other half of that communication. So the lock knows that it's in the Ritz-Carlton, it knows it's room 101, and it has a true date and time. So it's got a clock in it, just like in your watch or your phone or anything like that. So you get given your card, you present it to the door, and like a metal key, the data is just checked. So is this the right hotel? Is it the right room? Is it within 10 o'clock Friday and 4 o'clock Sunday? Yes, I'll let the guest in. No, I won't let them in. And that's it. It is as simple as that. Now, there are other bits and pieces, whether it's a guest card or a staff card or whether the deadbolt's been thrown, but that's all not really as important as those critical bits of information. So everybody used magstripe. Magstripe carried this bit of information, got you into your room, everyone was happy. The problem with magstripe technology, as with all technology, as it becomes older, it starts showing its weaknesses. So magstripe technology, it used to be that if you held your magnetic card next to your phone, which has a magnet in it, it would demagnetize the card. So there you are, standing at the door, sliding your card in and out, and nothing happens. Around 2002, there was a technology brought out called RFID. Now, RFID stands for Radio Frequency Identification Device. So it's another carrier for that bit of information. So the same information, the lock, where it is, who it is, the date and the time, now just gets put onto an RFID card rather than put onto a magstripe card. So from magstripe technology, in 2002, they moved over to RFID technology. RFID, radio frequency identification, is much more secure. It's less able to be corrupted, so you don't have the card being wiped, but the core information remains the same, i.e. building you're in, the room you're allowed into, and the date and the time. Now, technology moved on, everybody's happy, locks upgraded, they had to change their readers, but the core functionality remains the same. Now, RFID in 2012 had another small evolution, and that was something called NFC, Near Field Communication. So effectively, it's the same technology, but is a little bit more secure, has a lot less energy to it, and means that the communication carrier needs to be closer to the device. So an RFID card can work up to 1 meter away, whereas an NFC card or carrier only works up to about 10 centimeters away. So being a lower range read, it means the batteries in the lock haven't got to work so hard. So effectively you get slightly bit of battery life. So this is really where in 2012, when iPhone, I think it was iPhone 5 came out about then, everyone said, great, iPhone uses their app wallet, that's NFC built into the actual device itself. We'll all move over to that technology. Problem was at that point in time that Apple decided that they didn't want to open up the NFC functionality on their phones. Android did, but of course, 50% of the global market suddenly couldn't use that technology in their locks. So the lock remained RFID, which is pretty much where we are today. The hotel industry, however, still wanted a guest to use their own device. They wanted to move away from having to issue a card. The only other real solution available was Bluetooth Low Energy specifically. So again, the same information, where you are, the date, the time, the room number, but it's just a different carrier again. We're now in the world of Bluetooth Low Energy. Bluetooth Low Energy is transmitted by the phone, but it needs a supporting app to actually operate. And this is where the industry has sort of, should I say, stopped its evolution.
Yep, stumbled in a sense.
Yeah, so RFID, tried and tested, works brilliantly. Want to start using a mobile device? Great, we'll use NFC, but Apple put paid to that. Other alternative is then BLE. Problem is with BLE, because I now need to develop an app to put onto the device to be able to carry this information, all the hotel chains suddenly had to invest in software or software developers to build the app. Stop me if I'm going too far ahead. I'm just trying to sort of build this roadmap of where we are today and how we can now get back to it. So
this is good. This is good. So this is almost where we are now, really. As you said, I think it was, is it 2012 or 2014 that Marriott was the first group that pretty much came out with an app that would support what we call mobile key, which is allowing a guest to use a Bluetooth Low Energy to open their door?
Correct. So you've got the Marriott Bonvoy app. They developed it so that they could try and capture guests. It wasn't so much for the Bluetooth element, it was more the fact that they could then capture a guest. And rather than a guest going through an OTA to book a reservation, if you're doing it through their own proprietary app, they can actually manage that guest stay. And they can manage the guest information, and they can get repeat business and rewards and everything else. And as an add-on to that, to encourage guests to use it, you've suddenly got this new technology to get into the room, i.e. the Bluetooth.
So as a bonus of being part of the loyalty program.
Correct. Now, this same information still applies. To get rid of the property name, the date and time and everything else, it is just the carrier. So Marriott went ahead and they developed the Bonvoy app. They had enough financial clout to be able to develop an app that's unique to them so they can capture this information and allow the guests to use their mobile device. Unfortunately, not every hotel chain or hotel operator has deep enough pockets to do this. So there then became a range of third-party app developers that a hotelier could effectively pay on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or an annual basis to build this app for them. This really is then got to the stage where the hotel said, well, why am I doing this? Why am I developing and paying for an app to allow a guest to use their phone to open the door when I can still give them a bit of plastic that does exactly the same job? And so really, Bluetooth has been around. It has been talked about by a lot of the locking vendors to try and encourage an upgrade, because unfortunately, Bluetooth is different to RFID. So if you've got an RFID chip or an RFID lock, you need to add in a Bluetooth antenna. So you suddenly have an additional expenditure to make your locks work Bluetooth. So it's pretty much where we are at the moment. Some big chains do, some small chains thinking about it. A lot of the independent operators are going, it's just, I can't see the business model to actually do this.
Yep. And I think we've talked about it before, Daryl. One of the reasons, I suppose, to actually do it would be to eliminate that plastic key from a sustainability point of view, to be more environmentally friendly. And I think they'll, certainly in Europe, they're a bit ahead of us when it comes to sustainability, but I think we'll see it here as well.
I think there's a lot of hoteliers stroke operators that want to come across as environmentally friendly. And so, yes, we'll go away from using a plastic card and you can use your mobile phone. But in real terms, they're actually doing it for the cost saving of the plastic. Now, you buy a plastic card and just an arbitrary figure, it's $1. You can get them a lot cheaper than that. Let's just go for $1. Now, your average night stay is what, 2 nights or 3 nights? Well, let's make maths easy and say it's 1 night stay. Okay, so that's 365 bits of plastic that you have to issue. You probably only receive 50% of those back. Yeah, the other 50% go in the bin, or they go in the briefcase and you take them home with you, or they just don't get recovered. So all of a sudden, every room is costing you, what do we say, 365 divided by 2, let's call it 180. So $180 per room per year.
Yeah, that adds up.
Now, even if that's worst case scenario, you're saying 50% of that is realistic. So let's bring that down to, what are we saying, $80 per room. That's a hell of a lot of money that a property has to spend just to keep the bits of plastic flowing out the reception. Now, Bluetooth, what all the locking vendors do is you actually buy the Bluetooth token. Yeah, so that's the token that gets issued to the phone, and they charge you an annual fee for that token. But you can use that token as often as you like. So and there seems to be the average of around $25 a year per room for the token. So all of a sudden you're at $60 worth of plastic. Now you're at $25 worth of token. You're saving money. And you then multiply that to 100 beds or 300 bed hotel, you are saving a lot of money. So yes, there is this, let's be environmentally friendly, let's get rid of plastic. But there is also quite a big operational cost that isn't really understood or talked about. And I'll probably get shot by my peers in the industry for putting it out there. So look, the Bluetooth, there is a couple of pushes for it. 1, as I say, is the operational cost. 2 is the environmentally friendly element. And 3 is the wow factor. So the problem is the app development. And that's the big cost. And that's where nobody really wants to spend the money. So where is the future going from here, I suppose, is really where our conversation we had after the last meeting. It's back to NFC, believe it or not. So what's happened is Apple have now released the NFC functionality in their phone. All right. So all of a sudden, you now don't need to develop an app. You don't need to host an app. You don't need to do anything because the phone already has that inherent capability. Now, the downside to the industry is that if you went for an RFID lock, it didn't necessarily mean it was NFC enabled. So all of these hoteliers that have gone for RFID have upgraded to BLE, will now have to spend a little bit more money again on their lock to upgrade the RFID to NFC.
And are we at a point yet where we know that NFC will be the winning technology, or was jury's still out? As you said, prior to working with Apple, it is a pilot, is my understanding.
Yes.
There are obviously I think it was Floor Bleeker from the CIO of Accor said, look, it's a great step in the right direction, but obviously it only caters to 50% of our guests. What do we do about Android guests? And the other question was, what will the business model be? What are Apple going to charge a hotel? Are they going to, charge a per room per month fee, or is it going to be a per entry fee, which could add up, to be quite a substantial cost?
Yeah, and this is the way the whole industry goes. It's this incremental charges, and yes, so NFC is now available, or it has been available since 2004 to 2012, 2014, but it couldn't be adopted. It now can be adopted. You're right. Nobody really yet understands from Apple how they're going to make their charges. We understand from inside the industry that they are doing it on a per transaction basis. So each time a guest presents their phone to the door, Apple are going to get a little, half a cent or however much they get out of it, which then is going to build up very, very quickly. Rather than per stay, it's per use. So these are still questions that aren't 100% clear in the industry yet. The good things are with NFC is obviously because it's an inherent part of the iPhone, Android as well, and because it's very low energy, it actually continues to work even when the phone is flat. So your phone goes flat, you've still got 3 hours of NFC use. Yep. It also means you haven't got to touch the phone. So you can walk up to the door and automatically it can open it when you get close to it. Bearing in mind NFC is very, very close. It's almost touching the door. So it's not as if you're going to open everyone else's door. You have to go up to your own individual reader, be within 10 centimeters of it, and it'll open. You haven't got to get the phone out. You haven't got to open an app. You haven't got to launch.
So as long as it's in your pocket, a little bit like your car, literally these days.
Yeah, it is effectively exactly the same technology. It's in your pocket. It goes up to the door, you touch the door, and that's what releases it. Now, there will be options on that security that it might be like when you're going to pay through app wallets, where you go up to the reader and you have to present your thumb to it, or you have to Face ID it. It may be the same. So you may still need, or the operator may still want you to get your phone out to use it, but it won't be in the same way as you have currently with Bluetooth, where you have to get the phone out, unlock it, swipe through to the relevant app, open the app, choose the room, click on open, then present your phone. So it's a nice to have, but again, is the guest going to be comfortable doing that each time they want to go to the room? And these are the drawbacks with BLE. It was being sold as a great thing, and it is. It is great in as much as you can open the door without having a bit of plastic. But operationally, is it actually the best for the hotel industry? And that comes back to what we were talking about earlier, separate discussion over kiosks, as it really does depend on your guest profile. Are you a business traveler? Are you a holiday traveler? Are you a family? Are you staying at a resort? And every single property will need a different solution to what is the best way of opening the door.
Yeah, I think I always say, Daryl, you've got to offer guest choice. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There will still be guests for some time, that are not that tech savvy and won't be using Apple Wallet. They won't be using Google Pay or whatever it is. Yeah. There will always be a percentage of guests that will require a traditional form of access to their room that we haven't touched on, and I think it is worth highlighting. And I see it as sort of one of the stumbling blocks for the adoption of Bluetooth low energy is the fact that it does require a guest to download an app to their phone. So, in North America, loyalty programs seem to work extremely well. Mm-hmm. If you're Hyatt or Hilton, you've got plenty of choices of property to stay at. You can be quite loyal. You have downloaded the app, you can take advantage of mobile key. But here in Australia, with less, sites to visit in a sense, we haven't seen that sort of loyalty. So you might stay at Hyatt in Melbourne and Hilton in Adelaide, and then, Marriott in Brisbane. So you don't want 3 apps in a sense. So I think NFC is a step in the right direction from that point of view, certainly, right?
Yeah, look, that is a very, very valid point. That each hotel operator will develop their app their own way with their own features and everything else, which does then mean that if you're not as loyal as the American market is, and you're going to jump from one brand to another brand or operator to another operator, yeah, you're right. You're going to have to each time download a new app, which in itself isn't a problem. But whenever you download an app, you've then got to register, you've got to impart all your personal details, you've got to do everything else. And then you get the myriad of emails and subscription details and everything else, which I get enough emails in the day as it is without downloading one specifically for a brand that then going to bombard me with advertising. Now, you can normally opt out of it, but I don't know about you, Brendon, but if I've downloaded an app to stay at a hotel for whatever reasons, the day I check out, I normally delete it. Just delete it, and then, because I'm not going to need it again, or if I need it again, I'll download it again. It takes seconds to download. So you're right. If NFC wins the race, then the whole app goes out the window, because it's the inherent app that's built into the iPhone or the Android device. It does just mean, unfortunately, that all the hotel operators that have now gone down a certain route effectively are going to have to change their hardware again on the door to be able to accommodate NFC. So it's going to be a big big brave person to make a decision once they've gone down one route to another one.
Yeah, really good.
Still not 100% sure which way it's going to go. Now, this again comes back to, why are we doing this? Because the other element that is never really talked about is the energy management in the room. Sorry to bring it back to another subject, but it's all relevant, only in as much as probably 80 to 90% of the hotels in Australia still have a wall reader inside the room to turn the lights and the AC on, because it was a legal requirement during builds for energy efficiencies.
Yep.
Now, the moment you say goodbye to the plastic because you're using a mobile phone because of the wow factor, you now have no way for the guests to turn the lights and the AC on.
I've seen that. There was I won't mention the client, but just pre-COVID, they started using mobile key for guests.
Yep.
And when they kicked off, they had about 10 rooms a day that they had to go up, and they put the key card into the slot before the guest's arrival. Then by the time COVID hit, I think it was 40 rooms a day that staff would have to go up and, in a sense, pre-prepare the room for the arriving guests, which just doesn't make sense, right? So it's got to be.
You're 100% right. You've got the operational cost of somebody having to go to the room, but manpower costs money. So what's going to happen, and this as well as I do, what will happen is they will just put a card in the slot and they will leave it there. So you're investing a huge amount of money in your technology to allow a guest to use their mobile phone to open the door, to be environmentally friendly so that they haven't got to use plastic cards. However, you're now leaving the AC and the lights on 24/7 for the whole duration of their stay.
Correct. And then if you service that room for a couple of days after checkout, as you said, the air conditioning is running with the room completely unoccupied for a couple of days, and that was the reason that the key card was put in there in the first place, to be energy efficient. Yeah.
So all of a sudden you've got this roadmap of going away from a metal key. Now, the reason we went away from the metal key was because you had to recover them from the guests. So it was a real operational issue. If a guest went home, they ways around it. They used to put a huge, great wooden fob on the end of it, so you had to drag it to the door. But that was to try and stop you taking it home and then having to recover it. Magstripe technology saved that overnight. Guests took a card away, didn't really matter, you just created a new card. The inconvenience of having the card when it was Magstripe was that the information got corrupted. So you then had guest complaints, keep coming back to the desk going, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So RFID came along, happy days, cards don't get corrupted anymore. And quite honestly, it's probably the best technology for the hotel industry, for the types of guests, the stays, and operationally everything they can do. Now, it also fits into the energy management that's installed in the room. So you've got the energy efficiencies, you've got the guest satisfaction, you've got the operational requirements. It's only those technology savvy companies that are sort of saying, well, I can use my mobile phone, I can, airports, you can now check in with your mobile phone and go straight to the plane. Isn't it great? I want my hotel to do the same. It really doesn't achieve anything for the guest, though. All it's doing is adding cost to the property, because you've got to upgrade your locks. You've then got to buy or develop an app. You've then got the problem, how do I manage the energy efficiency in the room? So I've either got to start investing in a smart thermostat, so change my thermostat over that it's now monitoring room occupancy and everything else.
Which hotels should do anyway, really.
Agreed, 100%. There is no, and the cost of these systems, are very, very, very affordable. The ROI is incredible.
Yep.
But there's a certain, I'll wait until I'm refurbishing my room, because that's normal thing.
It does make sense to do it at the time of refurbishment. Often what I have seen though is hotels refurbish and they don't quite have enough money and they'll put it off again for another 8 years. So they've got key cards for another.
Yeah, I think the historical approach to refurbishing a room, the moment somebody said talking about putting in a smart thermostat, again, we're going off topic again a little bit. They were concerned that you're going to have to rewire the room. Now, the newer thermostats, you can literally take the old one off, plug a new one in. So may need a little bit of behind the scenes wiring, but it then becomes fully functional, talking on the Wi-Fi, talking on the Zigbee, talking on the Bluetooth. So it becomes the hub for the room. But going back to the lock, you've sort of progressed to RFID. You've reached really the pinnacle of the guest experience. Moving then onto Bluetooth was a nice to have, but had its problems. Now you've got NFC, which removes half of the problems, i.e. the app development and everything else, but doesn't solve the other problems. So yes, we need to become more environmentally friendly. Yes, we need to get rid of the plastic that we're currently using over and over again. But I think there's probably better ways of doing it. And probably the best way is to encourage your staff or incentivize the guest that if they return the card at the end of their stay, they get something. Or when the guest checks out, you specifically request, thank you very much for your stay. Did you use the minibar? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Can I have your cards back, please? Because if you recover another 50% of those cards, your ongoing annual fees drop, and those cards are reusable. RFID you can reuse over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They effectively will work forever. So it comes down to better operational training, and incentivizing the guests to leave the card behind will then give you your efficiencies and your environmental tick in the box without going down the expense of having different technology on the door.
That makes sense. What do you say then? I mean, I think a lot of hoteliers think that mobile key will reduce the need for the front desk completely. So that's obviously a substantial cost saving. Personally, I don't believe that we'll ever be able to eliminate front desk completely. That's what differentiates us from Airbnb, and it's that having somebody, that the human person, somebody to deliver proper human contact, I think is important. Yep. But then you've also got when you talk to a lot of hoteliers that travel frequently, or business people, they're like, I don't like checking in. I would like to take advantage of something like mobile key to bypass the reception desk.
Yep.
Is that a small percentage of guests, you think? Or
again, it comes back to your guest profile and what you're trying to achieve. But the concept that I want to bypass the reception desk altogether has to be brought into question. Why? And the reason why is it takes so long. It's not because you don't want to say good morning or good afternoon, or I just want to go straight to the room. It just takes so long. And the actual issuing of the key, it takes seconds.
It's the paperwork before that. So it's
correct. It's the identification. It's the taking your credit card for incidentals. It's scanning your passport if you're overseas. It's all those other things. And then there's the proverbial form you've got to sign in 3 different places, fill in your email address, fill in your telephone number, which again is really just there to capture your information to bypass the OTs in the future.
Yes, yeah, it's paperwork.
It's not the issuing of the key that takes the time. So there may be a thought process that if I can streamline the check-in process on my phone, so you have an app that you can check in, you can do your pre-authorization on your credit card, you can sign your life away and do everything else that you normally do at reception. Then when you get to reception, you literally just have to show, almost like a COVID vaccine, you've got a green tick. You know, Brendon, here's my green tick. And they go, right, sweet, there's your room key.
Yep.
Again, different way of skinning the same cat, but it may save all of that costs and aggro and ongoing reoccurring fees associated with having to upgrade your locks. So yes, do you need to speed up the check-in process? 100% is the bane of most people's lives, and it creates the queue, and it means you've got to have extra staff.
Yes.
But as I say, the key element isn't what slows it down.
And what I suppose we're saying here is that you can pre-check in to the hotel like we've been doing with airlines for years.
Yep.
I think statistically, that article that was published by Qantas said that more than 3/4, so more than 75% of their people or passengers are actually checking in electronically.
Yep.
In the hotel sense, I think I read it's something like 3 or 4%. But there are systems out there that are not app-based. They are what we call progressive web apps. So you don't need to download it. So the guest can be sent an email or an SMS and simply complete, you know, the whole paperwork, the ID, the credit card, the signing of a digital registration card before they arrive. And as you said, streamlines it. I've read that you can actually reduce front desk load by at least 50%. So if you've got 2 staff, you could get away with 1.
Yep.
And then when the guest arrives, they literally present, you know, hey, I've pre-checked in, welcome, thank you very much, there's the card. And as you said, encoding a card is seconds.
Yep. So you work on that same scenario again. If we refer back to the airport industry, so you check into a flight to Adelaide, and there are various means of checking in and what have you, but you either end up with a QR code on your phone or a piece of paper that has a barcode on it. But the actually getting onto the plane, so that final check-in process, there's normally 2 members of staff, and you can get 200 people onto a plane within 10 minutes. Yep. And then the doors close and you take off. But it's not, okay, it's not a very personal thing because you're being rushed through a turnstile effectively. And each time you scan your QR code, little beep, and you're allowed in. But the same principle could be applied in a much more professional way. Not saying that planes aren't professional, but in a more hospitality professional way. Yeah,
that's interesting you say that because, and you referenced Adelaide, obviously when I was going to AHIS, when I checked in, you know, with my phone, and the actual attendant said, you know, welcome, Mr. Granger.
Yep.
When I checked into the hotel, I got no eye contact. I got no welcome, Mr. Granger. It's like, can I please have some ID? Can I please have a credit card? Can you please sign here? Press hard, 3 copies.
Yep.
Thank you very much. So I think your analogy is actually a great one. That final, you know, checking in at the gate is very close to front desk. And hotels should be able to do a better job because we're not processing, we're trying to process 200 people in 10 minutes.
Exactly.
So if you allow people to pre-check in, it's up to them when they arrive at the desk. If they want to have a leisurely conversation with your staff, great. They can ask about the property. Your staff can engage with them. If the guest looks like they mean business and they just want a key and they're a regular, you give them the key as well. So I think we can offer the best of both worlds.
Oh, I think every hotel is different. And I think, is there a place for mobile keys in the hotel industry? 100%. Is it BLE or NFC? That argument is always going to keep going. It's like the Betamax and the VHS, or the Holden and the Ford. They both do the same thing. One prefers one prefers the other. But quite where it'll end up, nobody quite knows. But the core thing is, as long as the locks are RFID, that was the biggest step back in 2002, 2003 that really changed the hotel industry, because all those guest complaints about the card losing its information went out the door. It's then really just the add-ons that you can throw onto that. And I think that the argument about the environmentally friendly side of it, say there are ways you can manage that. So I think the hotel locking technology has reached pretty much the pinnacle when it comes to getting the guest in the room. Because remember, it's still those main bits of information: which hotel you're in, when's it going to work, and which room am I allowed in. And all you're doing is just changing the carrier for the information. Yes, lock technology has changed, and you can now go online and you can integrate it into the thermostat, and you can do all sorts of other fancy things. But actually getting the guest through the door hasn't changed. Even COVID hasn't changed that, because it is still a touch point. True. There aren't many hotel rooms that you can go up to where the door opens without you touching it. You still have to touch that handle. So whether you're using a mobile phone, whether you're using a bit of plastic, or whether you're using a metal key, you still have to touch the door. So COVID really is a smoke screen to people going, well, I'm going to use mobile keys and because it's COVID safe. Yeah, not really.
Good point. So I suppose, just in wrapping up, as long as you got RFID locks, then they can be upgraded to BLE if you have not done so already.
Correct.
Or to NFC, if
Correct.
that is the technology that we see probably within the next 12 to 18 months turns out to be the front runner.
Most of the locking vendors now in the market are bringing out NFC-enabled locks. So the locks are effectively coming out RFID and NFC. And then you have the option to add Bluetooth if you want to. Bluetooth is always an add-on because it's a different antenna and it's a different technology effectively. The problem is, up until possibly even middle of last year, early part of last year, any lock that was installed prior to that, if you want to go NFC, will almost definitely need to have more technology added to it. So there will be a cost, unfortunately.
Understand. But I suppose what we are also saying is that we've been talking about mobile key for 10 years now.
Yep.
Uptake globally is anywhere from 5 to 8% of guests, and that is unlikely to change.
I think you've also got to be a little bit careful with that 5 to 8%, because a lot of that is based on corporate travel in one or two countries. So it's not necessarily reflective of what's happening in the hotel industry in Australia and our profile of guest. So, because you said earlier on, and you're 100% right, in America, you've got some very loyal Marriott customers and some very loyal Hilton customers and some very loyal Hyatt customers. We don't have that same level of loyalty. Therefore, the actual uptake of the mobile device means of opening the door isn't as high. So I would question whether it's even as high as 5% in Australia. Globally, it might be, but Australia, I personally believe it's probably considerably less than that.
Yep. There are not that many implementations, I suppose, of mobile key in the Australian market. But
different if you move into a slightly different guest profile. So student accommodation, for example, you're staying in your own residence for 6 months term or a 4 month term or whatever it is. That makes more sense to go down the Bluetooth route than plastic card.
Definitely. Because
you're not reissuing it. You've got that same guest. They have their same approach to the same building. So it comes like their home. And therefore, the Bluetooth makes more sense in that environment, or the long-term service department environment, or the residential, or the build-to-rent. It's the hotel. It's that sort of high turnover, 2, 3, 4 night stays that you probably find the Bluetooth is less adopted.
That makes sense too, doesn't it? So, just in wrapping up, I think we need to watch this space, right? We need to watch closely the trials with Hyatt and Apple.
Yep.
To see how they go, to see what the business model will be. to see what the take-up rate is. And from that point, we can probably make some relatively informed decisions. But I think, as we said, mobile key is certainly one option, but to achieve sustainability, to streamline the check-in process, there are actually things that hoteliers can be doing now.
Yep.
For example, looking at pre-arrival check-in, like we do with the airlines, to allow the guests to do the paperwork before they arrive at the hotel, so that when they get there, they literally present to the front desk, they get greeted, key gets cut for them in seconds, and they're off to their room.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much a summary of where we're at. And I'm obviously in the industry, and I'm trying to educate my customers on the way forward. Now, I don't necessarily have the answers. Nobody knows what's happening around the corner, but I just implore people to think more about the reasons why they're making these decisions, because it's very quick to go, I'm making a decision because of X, without necessarily taking in everything else that goes along with it. If I was investing in a property, I would be investing in energy management. That's where the cost is. The guest experience, putting, whether it's mobile key, whether it's a metal key, whether it's a bit of plastic, really doesn't impact them too much. The guest wants to get into the room, they all do that. But the guest wants, the environmental impact of the room, the welcome, the stay, everything else that goes along with it. So I think sometimes there's a little bit too much focus on where the mobile key stroke future technology is of the lock.
Yep.
As I said, there is a place for it, and there are some very, very good reasons why you should have it. But there's also a lot of reasons why you should consider other ways of improving the process.
Totally agree. It sounds like at some point we should have another conversation regarding energy management as well. I think there's quite a lot of education still to be done in that space. You're quite right. My belief is that good energy management shouldn't actually require the guest to do anything that is, put in a key card or take out a key card.
Yep.
It should all be invisible to them, and it should just happen behind the scenes. Better for the guest and better for the hotel from an energy efficiency and sustainability point of view as well. So, yeah,
there's that whole space, and you're right. It's probably save it for another day. But that whole space is, again, the reason you're doing it, and you're 100% right. The guest should not be involved in this decision. You shouldn't try and introduce a system that's trying to do the bells and the whistles. There is very, very simple, cost-effective ways of making it seamless, giving you your. And I think we were at a conference this week where they were talking about electricity and gas expenditure, and prices in New South Wales have gone up over 200%.
Yep.
For electricity in the last month or so.
Yep.
And electricity, prices never come down. So once they've gone up, they're probably going to stay up there. So that's where really hotels should be focusing, not waiting for doing a refurbishment, not waiting to do X, Y, and Z. They should be looking now at how best to do something that's going to reduce those energy costs without impacting the guest and without interrupting that guest experience.
Yep. Yeah, quite right. Yep.
Now, the other side of that is the lock does form part of that. So it is all a bit of a segue from one to the other. So yes, let's get together again and we'll go through that subject.
Daryl, thank you so much
No problem.
for time today to discuss locks. It's been interesting. It sounds like we'll probably need to come back and have a chat further anyway, once we've got a little bit more feedback on, NFC versus BLE and
I'll probably be retired by the time that one gets settled.
It could be the case too. Maybe hotels will be in space, so it won't matter.
Yeah, because then there's that talk of biometrics, but that's for a different day altogether.
Sounds great. Thanks again, Daryl. Take care.
No problems. Thanks. Good to see you.